I need you in Taiwan, I need you in Dubai, I need you in London. I couldn't say no.
We started to really understand how it came together.
We went from things that I'm too embarrassed to even talk about.
I guess I would say like chaos.
Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast.
Are you amazed that you can do that?
Yeah, actually a little bit. We started with stateless apps because they're easy, and if you don't have state, you have a lot lower expectations. And then I think the first time we came up with a model for like running an arbitrary Rails app all over the world, and it worked with like minimal changes, it was like kind of astonishing to me that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
It's been very cool.
And was that your pivot? Like apparently companies are supposed to pivot. Did you pivoted from?
Oh boy, we pivoted
stateless
so
to
many
state?
times. No, that was boy, we could get into that. All the things we tried, all the things we tried wrong. You'll get a kick out of this. So when we started the company in 2017, the entire like premise was CDNs kind of sucked for developers. If you could make something that would really give developers power, it'd be big. It was like just big. There was no like specific size. It was like, that sounds pretty huge. And then it was a exercise. It was basically a 3-year exercise in figuring out what the hell we actually meant by that. And so we tried a couple of things, which were pivots, but it was all within the same, like the general problem existed. And you're probably well aware of this one, where like CDNs are amazing for delivering the same video to 1 million people pretty reasonably well with minimal buffering, hopefully. And they're not so good for like dynamic applications where every user sees an entirely different thing. And that's like kind of the interesting apps to build. And so I think what's interesting about the pivots, we went from things that I'm too embarrassed to even talk about anymore that had got no traction whatsoever. we had a proxy we ran in 6 whole regions that all it would do was it would let you define webhooks for when requests came in to like alter what actually happened with that request. One of the things that always irritated me about like HTTP caching is how bad of interface HTTP headers are for controlling a cache. It's just like, I like to write code. That seems terrible. I'd rather write an if statement. And so, yeah, we were kind of weak about it, I think. We were like, well, this is an easy thing to try. That's not running people's code, because that sounds hard and scary. And then we tossed all that stuff. The pivots were like from there to, then we built a multi-tenant JavaScript runtime, kind of like Cloudflare Workers. And then we couldn't get devs to use that. We get big companies to use it. But I felt like whatever we needed to, if like we're building something for devs, they'll probably drag us along. And if they're not really picking it up, it's probably not all that useful. And so I think the big scary pivot was from the JavaScript runtime to let's run any code. And then things like adding disks and databases were very natural evolutions just based on getting users that needed to do things. And they did start dragging us along. That was a very long-winded answer.
I was traveling a lot, and eventually I find out that my son has a heart condition. And then it really kind of struck me down, and I was like, okay, I need to deal with this. I can't travel as much. But I couldn't stop because, when my boss says, hey, I need you in Taiwan, I need you in Dubai, I need you in London, I couldn't say no. Then I said, okay, well, the only way I can stop this if I'm my own boss. But I also had a eyesight issue myself, which made me have to go to Colombia to seek a solution. The problem I have with my eyes is called keratoconus, and Colombia is very advanced with their eye treatments. So I went there, and I had to stay there 2-3 weeks and 5-6 times a year during the 2-year period. Then I noticed, I'm like, what is going on here? Why there is no local content? The internet is really fast. It's in the local network. And I noticed, all right, you know what? This could be an interesting business. Found my first anchor customer. I think you were my first or second anchor customer. I don't exactly remember the count, but valuable customer, a reliable customer, of course. This is what it matters. We grew together a lot and tried to build a team. I met with some people in Colombia who basically told me, hey, there is this opportunity to buy this company. You can build it up from there. But that's how everything started. It's just, 2 separate health problems that created this opportunity for me, that I just wanted to just be my own boss. So if I have to take the day off to be with my son, to be with my family, I could do that.
Sounds like it was meant to be a little bit.
Yes, I think so.
And I mean, you started probably at a really good time for not just LATAM itself, but you had your feet under you before COVID showed up a little bit. But take me back to when you first started. Who was your first hire? What was the first position you
My
hired
first
for?
hire was Diana. I believe you have met with Diana or emailed exchanged with her. She was actually she's our general counsel still. She was the wife of our co-founder, Juan Alcazar, basically the person who came and told me as we met and became friends. The guy, was just a person that I met on the street a couple times, and he was so nice. He was like helping me to go to hospital and like so welcoming. And he told me this idea, hey Mehmet, I want to get out of here, the business that I'm doing. I want to go work for some startup. I have this idea, but I don't have the money. I said, well, I have the money, you have the idea, let's start something together. So we end up acquiring this company in Colombia called Reduno, and Diana was my first hire. Basically, she quit her job, well-paying, stable job as the general counsel, second person in charge on a big ISP actually in Colombia called S3 Wireless. She quit and came working for us for pennies, but now I think she makes it even more than pennies.
That's good. So you mentioned that you had the money. One of the things we've been talking about a little bit is bootstrapping versus venture capital versus debt funding. Like from your perspective, I mean, first question is, I guess, how did you fund Advenio? And second question is why that with all the options out there?
Yeah, I had the money, but I wanted to use somebody else's money because they told me it's less risky that way. But it didn't go that way, Aaron Hughes, who's very well known, CEO, founder of Six Connect, where I believe still chairman of many companies, but PeeringDB to be more specific, and Lane Patterson. So I went to them, and I went to 3 or 4 other people, including Jordan and yourself, I said, hey guys, I have this great idea that could be a great business in Latin America. Would you like to invest? Actually, several other guys. I'm going to mention this one because he still to this day message me once a month, tell me he regrets so much. Dan, the CEO of No IP. Anyway, so long story short, I went to this route mainly because it's not because I didn't have the money, but if I got other people's money, to get the return, they would also invest in time coaching me, developing me. And that was the very first 6 months to 1 year where, we tried to do many things, failed. We wanted to become a cloud provider. We wanted to become an enterprise storage and backup provider, failed. And then later I found the niche of a niche, just, hey, I bring international companies to Latin America and give them local access, build local networks. And that's it. That's how everything started. Self-funded. I started with Aaron and Lane, and later on, their lives have changed, their opportunities change, and then we parted ways. But in a very good terms, I actually still, involve Lane a little bit for some consulting stuff with us. But I'm. That's how everything started. I took a lot of loans, paid back. We don't all, have a lot of loans right now that's waiting to be paid, but it's all self-made. And thanks to friends who supported us,
How did Corbitt get started? I think that's so. What the 3 coolest jobs that I think you've had are this running Dig in the chaos and obviously starting Equinix. But to me, how Corbitt started is what makes it the coolest.
Yeah. So I have a son, and his name is Benjamin. Ben has had kind of an incredible ride. He was born with learning differences, anxiety issues, and so on, and dyslexia, amongst some other stuff. And when he was going into high school, he really had, as it was a huge high school, public high school here in Mill Valley, and he had a hard time sort of, jumping into these big classrooms, and there was a lot of stimulus and whatnot. And the folks there decided to make one of his first classes at the beginning of the week the sort of, I guess you call it the maker studio now. It's 2022.
Yes.
You don't call it the wood shop. You call it the maker studio. You know, they have like 3D printers and a lathe, you know.
That's a union requirement, I think. You have to have a lathe.
I think so. They have to have one. And you know, and he was really into it. And that doesn't surprise me. He always had a lot of talent with that kind of stuff. And my wife, Brenda, says to me, you know, because I'm one of the nerdy dads, right? You know, he's getting a little too old for you to play Dungeons and Dragons with him. You know, maybe instead of throwing the ball around, because you're not going to do that, you might do a project with him. You seem to like this pinball thing. You've been sort of playing around at friends. What do you think about restoring a pinball machine with Ben? And so that is, in fact, what I did. From scratch, we took apart a machine and we basically went from scratch, you know, sanded it down, removed all the parts, removed the play field, set up a corner of like our garage where we would like take it apart. And we didn't know what we were doing.
Sure.
We had no idea. Like, thank goodness for YouTube and online communities like Pinside and whatnot. We started to really understand sort of how it all kind of came together. Now, in parallel to this happening, I got two buddies of mine, Ron Richards, who ran marketing for me at Revision 3, and Brian O'Neill, who I knew from the development group at Dig and later Circa and some other companies that, you know, he got involved with. And we've always known each other for a long, long time. And they're super into pinball. And I would go to the video game expos from time to time because I'm like an 80s kid.
Yeah.
But I never went to one in California. And they said, Jay, you should come to this one in Santa Clara. It's called California Extreme. And you're going to love it because it's got all the video games you want. And we know that you kind of like pinball, like, and there's some pinball. So I go there. It's like all pinball. There's every pinball machine on earth. And there's a huge tournament going on. And I'm watching all of these guys whose day job is to work at Google or whatever. They all have day jobs that are super technical. And they're writing the scores down on Post-it notes. I shit you not.
Yeah.
They're not even like typing it into a laptop. It's Post-it notes. And I'm just looking at that and I'm thinking, well, that's dumb. And Ron and Brian had been working with me on another project that was kind of, you know, parallel around high score keeping, you know, some kind of internet app or something. And then it sort of all gelled together. Like, hey, wait, could we figure out a way to take these old devices and kind of make them new again by like, and yeah. And so I'd never made hardware before.
How hard can it be?
How hard can it
be?
It must be. Whatever, you know. I think we started that project in 2015. We started demoing our first sort of score extraction like in 2016.
Yeah.
Some of our now competitors found out in 2017 and emulated us, which was great. And yeah, like it's just been this sort of crazy thing. And at a certain point, I think it was, I had to kind of focus on it full time. And we have customers now. We have literally tens of thousands of these machines connected to our platform all over the earth. The majority not in the United States. It's everywhere.
Interesting.
It's crazy. Yeah, I think we hit like the 2 million, I want to say 2 million score mark, or maybe it was the 1.5 million score mark at some point at the beginning of this year. And it's just been basically they have like I think it was Andy used to say to me that if you're not embarrassed about the product that you're shipping, you waited too long. It's been like that from day one here. Like the second it's like barely available, the broken version, like the community is going crazy and going for it. And I'm just, we do have investors, but everybody who put money into this company is treating it very differently as a profits-oriented business, where we built the model to be organically grown. We decided that we would focus on an actual business model, build an app, hire contractors, hire employees, bring experts in, but do it a totally different way. And it is the most fun I've ever had building a business.
When you and I first met, we were talking about this earlier. We probably had 3 customers in the business, and it was pure IaaS, right? Like there's no software that anyone was using or anything like that. Like we built some tech, we put it on the internet, made a sign up form, right? Or a call us or whatever form, and started to hunt down customers, right? And over time, we were able to grow a really big and really important customer base, but we started with none, right? Started with nobody using the thing, and we really had to figure out like how to talk about and engage potential customers around, here's the problem that we've built this technology to solve, and here's how we're better and different than Dyn or Newstar or Akamai or whomever, right? And why you should try our shiny new thing. And in contrast, Netbox is very different, because it's open source, right? Netbox a little bit more on like the provenance here. Netbox was built by the networking team at DigitalOcean back in the mid 2010s when they needed to solve these problems of documenting and automating their obviously like big, complex, rapidly evolving IT and network environment. And because this tech is obviously not core to their business model, which is developer cloud, they said, you know what, let's open source it. And it took on a life of its own. I think the reason it took on a life of its own, in part, was there was a community around Jeremy Stretch, who's the founder of this open source project already. He's the guy, some people may recall the old Packet Life blog. That was Jeremy. All these tutorials and engagement around his content. And so that was like a shot in the arm initially for engagement around this interesting new Netbox tool. And it caused people to try it, caused people to contribute to it, caused people to say, oh, this is a better way than Excel for managing my IP addresses, for example, or whatever. Begin to use it, and sort of grew and evolved organically from there, as we've seen a lot of other open source projects do. And so the state of play today is Netbox is used by everyone, right? Like almost every enterprise in the world with a network has Netbox in it somewhere, is what I continue to find. And yet, no business was built around this thing. It was really organic, real like community-led adoption and contribution and so on to this project. And that works to a point. And at some point, and this is what we found at NS1, at some point, maybe the founders and the lead maintainers of the open source project, start to get tired, or the demands of the project go beyond what they can manage on a day-to-day basis, and it gets really challenging to manage this thing totally organically. At some point, you've got to figure out how to make it sustainable, because it's an important technology to the world, and that is definitely what Netbox is. And we can talk about this a little bit more, but that's our mission at Netbox Labs, is like, let's figure out how to make this really important open source project and community self-sustaining, how to like hire and pay for developers and engineers and product managers and so on around this thing, how to help companies be more successful with this software. And it's very different than, like as you said, than the outset of something like NS1, where no one's using this thing. Everybody's using this thing. And so, in a lot of ways, it feels like we're way bigger, right at the outset of Netbox Labs than NS1 ever was, right? There's a far larger install base, but there are other ways in which we're way smaller. Like there's so much demand and so much, I guess I would say like chaos, because of the scale and the needs of the existing install base. And we started a year ago spinning out from NS1 with A few people, no office, like any seed stage startup, basically saying, "Oh, we gotta figure out how to meet this demand." So, I think it's been very important at the outset of this business that we had the scale experience from NS1, running some gigantic chunk of the internet through our DNS, in order to address the scale of the open source install base and community, and figure out how to orient a business in support of it. If we didn't have that, right? If we were, shiny new entrepreneurs cutting our teeth for the first time on this Netbox problem, I think we would be drowning. So there's a little bit of perspective and probably a lot of different threads that we could pull in there.
Yeah, something that strikes me is, something that I always find interesting is, when people start businesses and they say, we're going to build in public, right? We're going to make all of our, everything's going to be transparent, share all the details. It strikes me that this is a very different but probably more challenging version of building in public, because there's a lot of day zero opinions on what you need to be doing in your business that aren't coming from founders, investors. Just having that built-in user base with a set of expectations has to be a real challenge.
There are a lot of stakeholders, to use that word, right? And you're right, like many and varied opinions. And you see this in any open source business, right? Like one of the things that we know is, as we build commercial offerings around Netbox, for example, 90% of the people using Netbox are never going to engage commercially, right? They're going to continue to use the open source, and they're going to have expectations and demands on the open source project, and that's fine for what it's worth, right? Like one of the terms that I use to describe the nature of what we're trying to build is this notion of a virtuous circle, right? Our job is figure out how to build commercial products that you pay for, around Netbox, that are valuable to that 10% who wants to engage commercially, generate revenue that enables us to go hire open source developers, open source product managers, and the like, who are going to create more value, in the open, to your point, for the 90%. And some people hate that, right? There are purists who say, like, revenue around this open source project is bad, right? Like there should never be that. And I think my personal opinion is, we want the open source community and project around Netbox to succeed. We want it to continue to exist. We want it to get better. We want it to adapt to the new needs in the world as new technologies emerge or new use cases emerge or whatever. And the only way that happens is some kind of investment. And, that investment so far has been borne mostly on a volunteer basis, by people who have poured their heart and soul into the open source technology and project. But for that to continue to persist, not just for a few more years, but, on an ongoing basis, decades, right? Like you've got to figure out how to make it sustainable. And I think that takes dollars, right? So, I think if you look at the best open source businesses in the world who have had a similar problem of, a scaled open source install base and then trying to figure out how to make it sustainable.
This is different, another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CacheFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CacheFly.